The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Choo, choo. The Alex Ovechkin train keeps rolling down the tracks. 10 more goals, and he breaks Wayne Gretzky's record. When will that happen? Can they engineer it so it happens at home? Be great on the road, be greater at home. Right now, everybody's circling dates on the calendar when it might happen sometime next month. But it is just remarkable, and even more remarkable when you consider that he missed 16 games with a broken leg. And he came back as if nothing ever happened. Just incredible. Another big win, too, for the Caps last night. Overtime goal for Tom Wilson. And they beat the Rangers on the road. They are in very, very good shape with the trade deadline coming tomorrow. I would think that they'll add a few pieces to bulk up for the playoffs. Now, look, they've had years where they've won the President's Cup with the best record in the league, and they've gone out in the first round. It is what it is in hockey. But this has been an unexpectedly great year on both sides. Ovechkin is going to have the record, it appears, this year where it looked kind of like a long shot at the beginning of the year. And more importantly, a team that looked like it was rebuilding is really good. I mean, this is a Stanley Cup champion contender, and that would be, spectacular. It's kind of like, though not exactly like, what the Commanders did, except that the highlight of the Commanders season was the development of Jaden Daniels, whereas this season it's a 20-year veteran, one of the all-time greats in Alex Ovechkin. So that's been incredible to watch, and they get another big win last night. We'll look more into this in 10 o'clock hour. There is a basketball team in town, too. There's one that really, really stinks, though they got their 12th win last night, but they're doing what they're setting out to do, and that's to stink and get in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes or anybody else that may surface at the top of the draft. But they did beat Utah last night. As a matter of fact, I saw this on Twitter. Last night was the first game of the season. They played, 60-some games this year, 61 games. It's the first time this year that they were favored. They were favored at home against Utah last night, and they won the game. So that tells you what kind of a year it has been, but I guess mission accomplished in that they will have a lot of ping pong balls when we get to the draft lottery. I think it's in May. They usually have it like during the conference finals, I believe. I believe that's when they do that. And, of course, the draft takes place right after the end of the regular season. So I watched the whole Maryland game last night, and you got to give him credit. And Kevin Willard gives his team credit for this as well, that you had this devastating loss last week to Michigan State where you got beat on a 65-footer at the buzzer. I mean, that's the kind of deflating moment that can really take the wind out of the sails for an entire team. Didn't do it. They had a pretty quick turnaround. This was a Wednesday night game. They played on Saturday at noon at Penn State. They won there. And they won again last night at Michigan, and they won 71-65. They held Michigan to 22 points in the first half. 22 points for a team that has a couple of scores. This guy Wolf, he's going to be a lottery pick. He had a big game for them. He had about 20 points. Bunch of turnovers, though, and that was really the difference in the game. I'll get to that in a minute. But, these timeout interviews that they do them in all sports now. They even do them in the NFL. I guess television thinks that this really adds something great. To me, they're usually nothings. The coach will say, we've got to tighten up our defense a little bit. We're playing pretty well, yada, yada, yada. So Andy Katz is doing the sideline reporting for the Big Ten Network last night in Ann Arbor. And they get to an fairly early timeout. It was about 10 minutes into the game. So Michigan hit a couple of threes, and it's a 12-7 Michigan lead. And Kevin Willard, at the end of the timeout, does his little interview with Andy Katz. And again, these things are usually nothings. But Willard decided to have a little fun with it. which was kind of refreshing. So this is what happened, and everybody who was doing the game, was it Kevin Kugler, I think, did it last night, got a pretty good chuckle out of this. Again, this is during the timeout. Michigan is up 12-7 in our Ann Arbor, and Kevin Willard is talking to Andy Katz.
All right, Kevin, what has changed defensively over the last couple of minutes where they've gotten open for those threes?
They made a lucky three.
Anything you need to do differently?
No, they got 12 points in 10 minutes. It's our offense. We're struggling offensively, so we got to do better offensively. But they made a lucky three, and we can't leave Burnett.
Thanks.
Thank you.
A lucky three. Yeah, and the guy just sort of left Katz hanging there. Look, what? Yeah, lucky three. And coaches don't usually say that. It's like, oh, we got to get out on the shooters. We can't let them do that. No, he made a little joke out of that. I thought the real difference in the game was the turnovers. I mean, it was amazing how many turnovers that Michigan had. They had, not only did they have 16 of them, but 12 of them were on steals. It was just, you can, I guess, blame it on sloppiness for them, or you could say Maryland's defense was just suffocating. Dusty May is the Michigan coach. His name had come up for the Indiana job, even though he's only been there for a year. They just signed him to an extension, so he's sticking around. And this was his response to the question about all those turnovers last night.
We didn't make great decisions, and then the stretch with 5 or 6 minutes left, I thought we were competing at a really, really high level, and we were just playing a little bit sped up and fast. We just looked excitable during that stretch and tried to force it into Vlad, who had it going. And credit Maryland, they collapsed on him. And like I said, their bigs have really, really good instincts, especially in their drop coverage. So, we didn't make great decisions. And at that time, you're weighing whether to continue to attack and try to get it inside and find threes early, or do you slow it out and get organized? Obviously, if we're resulting, I should have stopped this and gotten more organized in those possessions.
Yeah, so they go down, and the turnovers are really a huge difference in the game. Maryland had some pretty good shooting last night. Selton Miguel, who has had some up and down games, he played well in the Penn State game. He had 17 points last night, hit a bunch of threes, and this again was post game with Andy Katz and Kevin Willard with Miguel with a cameo.
What's been the impact of Miguel?
Yeah, Selly's the best, man. He busts my balls all the time. He's my guy. If he shoots the ball every time, I'm the happiest guy in the world. He just likes to mess with me and not shoot it, but he's one of the best shooters I've seen in a long time. It doesn't matter where he is, he's the best.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, well, that was some high praise. One of the best shooters he's ever seen. He's seen some pretty good shooters in his career. What do you think of that kind of praise?
I'm just proud of him. He see me that way. He told me every day in practice, just no matter if you have a bad game or good game, come in there and shoot. I'm always going to believe in you.
Yeah, you like a coach, or you like a player probably likes this the best, a coach who says, keep shooting, don't stop shooting. And, again, he knocked down 17 points last night. Now, the Achilles heel for this team, for this Maryland team, which could finish as high as number 2 in the Big Ten. They've got a final game coming up against Northwestern Saturday afternoon at home at 3 o'clock. The Achilles heel for them is going to be foul trouble. And last night, they were managed to overcome that. Julian Reese played only 25 minutes because he was in foul trouble. He had only 6 points. He did have 4 rebounds and 2 blocks and really played good defense. He really played good defense. But he was limited to 25 minutes, and they can't have that. They got to have him on the floor for both ends, for the way he plays defense, and also when they start to struggle, the call always is, and Kevin Willard says this, if they're coming out of a timeout, they set up a play to get the ball inside to Julian Reese. He's the one that gets them going. Their best offensive player is Derek Queen, and Queen had a good night last night with 17 points and 12 rebounds. But the improvement in the offensive game of Julian Reese, particularly from his year 3 to year 4 this year, has been amazing. And at the free throw line where he was a liability, he's money now. He's a 70% free throw shooter. They fixed that. So he's really made a difference for them in a big way, both offensively and defensively. And when he's out of the game, that's a problem. So that is one thing they're going to be concerned about. Jordan Geronimo, who's dealt with some illness this year, he gave them all their bench points last night, 4, which is not unusual. They've had 1 or 2 games this year where they've had no bench points. They're basically playing 5 guys unless you get foul trouble. And Geronimo got 16 minutes last night. That's unusual for him. He's probably around 9 or 10 most games. And so that would be something to be concerned about. But also, in addition to what he means to them on the floor, it's what he's meant to the program and what he's meant to Kevin Willard since he came here 3 years ago. He was a holdover from the Turgeon regime. He's one of only 2 guys that's back from last year's team, which tells you a lot about college basketball these days. But Deshaun Harris-Smith, who has not performed in the way that they had hoped. He was a big-time recruit, one of the top recruits in the country. He's not playing much and cannot shoot. He played 4 minutes last night, no points. No points for him. Plays a little defense and did have a couple of rebounds, but he's not really much of a bench contributor. So you need all 5 on the court, and you need the glue of the program, which has been Julian Reese. And he will play his last home game in College Park on Saturday afternoon. And this was Willard last night after the game doing a little sell job for this game.
Saturdays for me is going to be about Julian Reese. You know, he's a rarity in college basketball now. He stayed 4 years, had a coaching change, stayed with me. We had a tough year last year. He stayed with me. He's a true Maryland guy. I'm asking our fans to come out and make sure they come early and really celebrate a true Terp.
Yeah, he will go down as one of the best players in program history. And I think you will see number 10 hanging from the rafters. I think that I wonder if they even have time to do that before the game on Saturday, or will they bring him back at some point? But, part of it is the NIL, that they did manage to come up with enough money to keep him. That's the reality of today. He may or may not be much of an NBA player. We'll have to see. I think he'll get a shot at it. He may wind up, playing in Europe. But, you think of the guys in, I'd say, the last, 15 years at Maryland who stayed all 4 years. Not many of them. There have been a few, but, of caliber enough to stay in the NBA, I would say. And nowadays, you're recruiting both ways. Like, if you've got a player from another team that you want to bring in, well, you're recruiting for that once the transfer portal opens up. You also have your own players, and the good ones you're recruiting to stay. The others, and this will be interesting to see what happens with Deshaun Harris-Smith, whether they say to him, it's just really not working out for you here. Why don't you go someplace else? And the other thing that's been going on in college basketball, and we got Gary Williams coming up the week after next in preparation for the tournament, so I'm going to ask him about this. But I've heard Kevin Willard say that the way things work now is you could take a player like that. He didn't mention him by name, but you could take a player who may be highly recruited, goes to a place like Maryland, finds that, he's not cracking the starting lineup, he's not an important part of the rotation, and you say, okay, you probably need to go someplace else, and maybe you can transfer back up again. It becomes like minor league baseball. So you got a guy like that, you say, go play at a level like George Washington or AU for a year, and then you can come back and play another year. And the way college basketball works now, it's a whole new team year to year. And I guess Rice will come back next year. I think Gillespie has another year of eligibility. But, Miguel is going to be gone. Reese is finally going to graduate. Queen is going to go to the NBA. That's the way things work these days. And, I grew up watching John Lucas play all 4 years at Maryland and become the number one pick. It didn't start to really change for the Gary Williams program until he recruited Joe Smith. And Joe Smith was not as one of the top recruits. He had played on an AAU team with Allen Iverson, who took all the shots, and so he wasn't scoring a lot of points. Comes to Maryland, he's player of the year. He leaves after 2 years. But a lot of the guys who were the history of this program were 4-year players and still were NBA guys. Steve Blake stayed 4 years at Maryland, had a nice journeyman NBA career. Played 10, 12 years, bunch of different teams, made some money. That's the way. As a matter of fact, the championship team from 2002, so we're going back 23 years. You look at the top 6 in the rotation, you had 3 seniors, 2 of them 5-year players because Byron Mouton had transferred, so he had to sit out a year. And then, Juan Dixon was a redshirt his first year. Lonnie Baxter was a 4-year player. And then you had the top reserve off the bench is a junior. So you of your top 6 guys, you had 3 seniors and 2 juniors, and a lottery pick who was a sophomore. We're kind of back to that now, but in a different way, and you're getting guys who come into schools like Maryland having been 3 different places in some cases, and this is their 4th school. It's just the way things work now. And so it's a question of, is the continuity more important, where you have players who are in your program, Steve Blake being the point guard for all 4 years, or are you better off now? Is the game better off? Never mind the behind-the-scenes stuff, but the actual on-the-floor product. Is it better now that you're playing guys who have significant college basketball playing experience and in some cases have been the big-time scorer wherever they came from, and they just kind of fit in here where, they're averaging, and they do have all 5 starters averaging double digits, but instead of averaging, 24 or 25 a game, you're averaging 16. And, everybody's okay with that. Look, they got a chance. They got a chance to be a Final Four team. I don't know if that's going to happen, but depending on where they go in the Big Ten tournament, and they could finish as high as number 2 in the Big Ten if they beat Northwestern Saturday, it's possible they could go in as maybe a 3 seed, maybe a 4, somewhere in there, depending on what they do in the Big Ten. If they win the Big Ten tournament, I would think they would be a 2 seed. And you never know. You never know. I mean, you can go out early, but that's the beauty of the NCAA tournament. You get hot at the right time, and this team is playing pretty well right now. They get in there, you never know what's going to happen. Coming up in the next hour, we've got some really good stuff from Justin Verlander. He talked to Dan Patrick yesterday as he is still pursuing 300 wins. He's about 35 away, 38 away, and he's 42 years old, but thinks he can do it. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. At one time, 300 was a reachable goal for a great pitcher. It may never happen again. And the last man who may have a chance, and it's an outside chance at the age of 42 to climb that mountain, is Justin Verlander, who has signed with the San Francisco Giants. He is about to start the season with them, had some injuries last year, but believes he can regain the form that he had a few years ago when he won the Cy Young, and believes he can get to 300 wins with still, I believe, 38 to go. We'll hear from him in a few minutes. He talked to Dan Patrick yesterday. And also, it was 44 years ago today that Walter Cronkite said, and that's the way it is, for the last time. Do you know what has happened to the anchorman position in this country? It is absolutely remarkable for someone who's of my age who remembers when Walter Cronkite was America's anchorman. And if Walter Cronkite said, it's a bad idea for us to be in Vietnam, things changed. Lyndon Johnson decided not to run for re-election, and the whole tenor of the country changed after the Tet Offensive in 1968. Now, Lester Holt, who's been doing NBC's Nightly News for 10 years now, and I think it's tremendous, he's leaving, and his replacement was named yesterday, and I didn't really even know how to pronounce it. I was told it's Llamas. His name is Tom Llamas, L-L-A-M-A-S. I don't think I have ever seen him on the air, and I will make this point and talk more about it later this hour. But when Dan Rather was replacing Walter Cronkite, everybody knew who Dan Rather was. He'd been on 60 Minutes forever. He had been a longtime reporter for CBS and first made his big mark covering the Kennedy assassination in 1963. Well, that was 18 years earlier. People knew who Dan Rather was. And Tom Llamas is about to become NBC's anchorman. I don't even know who does CBS. I have no idea. It's mainstream media is changing. And speaking of media, let's pretend here that this is a journalism class, and your assignment is to write a game story on the Washington Capitals. The Washington Capitals played the New York Rangers in New York last night, and they won in overtime. And on most nights, for most teams, you win in overtime on the road. This is the lead to your story.
2-on-1, Strome and Wilson into the zone. Strome down low, they score! It's Tom Wilson with the overtime game-winning goal. A tip from the side of the goal crease. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, New York. The Capitals rally with a goal in the third period and win it in overtime. Tom Wilson, the game winner. The Capitals win it by a final of 3-2.
John Walton on the Caps Radio Network. Yeah, overtime win on the road, game winner, that's the lead. Well, if you find the Associated Press story on this, they correctly, I believe correctly, went with this as the lead.
Second unit here. Mangiapane, McMichael, Frank, Chikrin, Ovechkin, and loose for Mangiapane off the draw. Loose there, and Ovechkin scores! Alex Ovechkin picks it up on the far side of the goal crease. That's goal number 885. 9:32 to go. He is 10 away from passing Gretzky, and the Capitals have tied it here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, the rules change. They change, I think, dramatically here because of the goal chase, the historic goal chase by Alex Ovechkin, which continues to get more amazing by the day. I mean, even a couple of weeks ago, we were saying, yeah, maybe. And, now they're projecting even as late as like March, or early, I should say, as March 30th because of the tear that he's been on. He's got 32 goals in 46 games, and in the middle of all that, he missed 16 games with a broken leg. I mean, for most people, that's a 6-month recovery fully. I mean, you do come back as an athlete after 6 or 8 weeks and something like that, but he's come back with a vengeance. And in a world, that's the guy who used to do the big voice. In a year where this team is now one of the top contenders for the Stanley Cup and winning big games on the road as they did last night in New York, that's secondary to the Alex Ovechkin chase, and it makes sense. And for the casual hockey fan, that means a lot more than what they're doing game to game on the ice. And they're great. They're tied with Winnipeg for the lead with most points, 88 points. And Spencer Carberry, the coach of the Capitals, said he feels a little bit of extra tension on the bench when he witnesses Ovechkin closing in on the record. Like he's doing two things in his mind at once, coaching the team and, making sure that Alex Ovechkin stays on track. And here's something else that I think we have to think about with what's going on with Ovechkin. He's 39 going on 40. Sometimes when a guy is coming up on a record like that, they kind of drag him across the finish line. If he gets it this year, and even if either way, whatever happens, whether they win the Stanley Cup, go deep in the playoffs, go out in the first round, whatever it is, I think Alex Ovechkin will play for a while. I mean, why shouldn't he? And we're seeing LeBron James at the age of 40, as good as he's been, 10 years ago. As Brian Windhorst has said a number of times, we have never seen anybody in NBA history this good for this long. Yeah, Jordan played till he was 40, but took those 2 long stints, took almost 2 years the first time to play baseball, and took 3 years after he retired from the Bulls before he came back with the Wizards, and at 40 was not this good. Yeah, he had big games. He had a 50-point game, but consistently like LeBron is doing. Wilt Chamberlain was out at like 35 or 36. Larry Bird had to retire at 35 because of a bad back. Magic Johnson because of the HIV virus. We haven't seen anything like this. And on the hockey side of it, yeah, Gordie Howe played till he was 51. We've seen guys go deep, but Alex Ovechkin, where we were thinking, oh, God, they got to drag him along for another couple of years till he gets the record. No, he's a big part of why they are tied for the best record in the league. and you want to keep him around. I don't know how long. I think the contract's got another year to go. They might think about another extension, maybe another 2 or 3 year extension. I think that's entirely possible because he's that good. It's just absolutely remarkable. All right, NBA. Obviously, the Wizards are not going to be a factor in this, but the top 3 teams in terms of odds to win the NBA Finals this year, to win the championship, Boston is number 1 to repeat. Oklahoma City is number 2. And the Cleveland Cavaliers are number 3. And Cleveland Cavaliers won again last night, their 12th straight game. They won 112-107 over the Miami Heat in Cleveland. They're the first team in the league to clinch a playoff spot. Bam Adebayo had a season-high 34 for Miami, but they just didn't have enough horses, and they missing a bunch of players. Tyler Hero, their leading scorer, was out. Andrew Wiggins, ankle sprain. And, there were guys who were not available for them, so Cleveland won that game. And then you had Boston, which is just an amazing team, the way they do things. They were missing 3 starters. Jason Tatum with a shoulder injury, Drew Holiday with a finger injury, Kristaps Porzingis was sick. So they had 2 guys last night. The number 2 scorer for Boston last night had 41. Can you imagine having 41 and not being the leading scorer for your team? Derek White, 41, had 9 threes as Boston made it 8 out of 10. And Peyton Pritchard had a career-high 43, 10 three-pointers as they beat the Trailblazers in Boston last night, 128-118. And Oklahoma City keeps on rolling. They won last night in Memphis, 120-103. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 41 points. They came back in the third quarter, and SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, joining SVP Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter.
I'm just having fun with the game. Nothing more than that. I'm trusting my teammates, trusting my work I put in the offseason, going out there and just trying to have fun and play free, and I'm being rewarded because of it.
We see your teammates on a nightly basis with our guy Nick Gallo, right? Like, you guys have so much fun in those post games, and it's the word that basketball teams use a lot is connected. And the fact that you guys seem to enjoy each other's company so much, how much does that have to do with the level of play that you guys, again, are putting out on a nightly basis? Because it truly seems that you enjoy each other as much as anything.
Yeah, it makes us who we are and why we've been so good this year. We can play through ups and downs. We trust each other through the good times and the bad times. And we know that the work that we put in, and because we're so together on both ends of the floor and out the floor, that the things will just work out for us, and they have so far.
I think everyone last year, Shai, made such a big deal about the relative youth, and you're still a very young team, but you did what you did last year, and now here you are again. If there are lessons learned in that step in the process that apply this year, what might they be when we get to the most important games of the year in the playoffs?
Yeah, we got to be ready for the moment. We have to play a certain way, build certain habits. We talked about those, obviously, throughout the summer and then this whole season. Our main focus is to be a better team than we were yesterday, and we've been doing that so far this year, and if we continue to do so, we'll be right where we want to be.
Yeah, 14 wins, 16 games. This is the blueprint for what's going on here. The brain trust with the Wizards had experience in Oklahoma City. I think that's where they both came from. Or no, I guess Michael Winger was with the Clippers, but he brought along Will Dawkins, and this is the plan. This is the plan to load up on draft picks and be able to put yourself in a position like Oklahoma City is right now. They've been there, done that. I mean, at one time they had, Kevin Durant and they had the two other superstars. They had a team that could have won and did not. So now they've reloaded again and have the possibility to do that. These are the three. These are the 3 teams, Cleveland, Boston, and Oklahoma City, that are at the top of the favorites to win the NBA championship. Kendrick Perkins on last night with Van Pelt, and his look at what he sees from the 3, starting with Cleveland.
Look, they're the biggest threat to the Boston Celtics, Scott, in the Eastern Conference, and they check all boxes when you look at their roster, right? They have bigs in Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. that's getting it done together. They have a dynamic backcourt in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Then they have great bench play from Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter. Here's the thing. Tonight, those are the games that this Cavalier team need, right? In the clutch, being able to figure things out. We heard Donovan Mitchell in his interview talk about the 2 turnovers he had, the 1 turnover that Darius Garland had, and said that how they got to get better. That tells me that this team is locked in and focused and keeping the main thing, and that's actually getting prepared for the playoffs and preparing to make a deep run and possibly win the NBA championship.
Yeah, but you're still going to have to deal with Boston, and I'm still shaking my head, Perk. In my life, I've been doing this a while. I can't remember a dude having 9 threes and 41 and not having the most points or most threes on his team in a given night. How significant is it for Boston to continue to have guys step forward who aren't named Tatum and Brown, and there are hopes to win another one?
Scott, let me say this. A couple of days ago, I said that the Boston Celtics are going to repeat and win the 2025 NBA championship. And I was called everything but a child of God. And tonight proved my point. You know why? Tonight proved my point. Seriously. You have your 4th option and your 6th option both go for 40 pieces, all flats. That's how dangerous this team is. When they're healthy, there's no team in the NBA that's going to be able to beat them in a 7-game series, Scott. It is hard to do. These guys are stars in their role. They play agenda-free basketball. And when you look at their starting 5, there's no other team in the league that has a starting 5 that's all 2-way players when they're healthy. This team is going to repeat if they're healthy come postseason.
Perk, I've been hearing you say for years 40-piece all flats. Does that mean I can have the drums? Because who likes the flats? Give me the drums. You don't want the drums, Perk? Come on.
I do like the flats. In my household, we do order wings all flats. You can have the drumsticks though, Scott. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not gonna judge.
Then we'll get an 80-piece, 40 flats and 40 drums, and we'll be straight. All right. Hey, I want to close with this because I know you're a buyer of OKC, and I don't. Why wouldn't you be? They're a spectacular team. I asked Shea about this, and I'm interested in how you view it. The idea of being as young as they were a year ago and doing what they did, but what you learn along the way. Because we see a mature group even as young as they are. We see a connected group that we saw last year. But are they better this year than they were last year?
Absolutely. And they have culture, Scott. They have culture and they have identity. And that's on the defensive end. They are so physical defensively. They get into you. They frustrate you. They're tied together on the string. They get back in transition. They check all the boxes, and they have the personnel to get it done. It's no drop-off when you look at what they bring to the table on the defensive side of things. When you hang your hat on the defensive side, the sky's the limit, even when you're not shooting the ball well, and that's what we've been seeing out of the Oklahoma City Thunder.
And so as loaded as the West is, and as interesting as all the other stories are, you feel like that's the finals team, correct?
Scott, let me read this off to you real quick.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thunder defense leads in. They're first in defensive ratings. They're first in half-court defense. They're first in rim protection. They're first in defense versus on-ball screens. They're first in defense versus drives. They're first in defense versus isolation. They're first in deflections per game, first in steals per game, first in opponent turnover rate, first in points per game off turnovers, first in opponent points per game off of turnovers. Like, what else do you need? What else do they need to show you? They're going to lock you up defensively.
Yeah, I was going to have to tell you, the show's only an hour. I didn't know if you were going to keep reading first. But look, hey, that explains why they're 51-11, man. You have no argument for me. Look, there's some vets out west. It's going to be filled with tough hills to climb. But, I mean, everything worth having in life's on the other side of something difficult. So we look forward to seeing them as we get closer to the playoffs. Perk, I always enjoy you, man. You are a child of God. Don't forget that no matter what people tell you on the internet.
I appreciate you, SVP.
Yes,
you know, and here's something else that I got to look at this in a whole new way. You know, when I see a plate of wings, I'm a drum guy too. and I usually try to pick out the drums, and I kind of feel like it's a bowl of mixed nuts, and I'm pulling out the cashews. But Kendrick Perkins says he orders sometimes just flats. Wow, that's a revelation to me. But anyway, that's a rundown on the top three teams right now in the betting. And who knows what's going to happen, and maybe this LeBron and Luka thing will turn it up for the playoffs, and maybe they'll be the team that comes out of the West. Who knows? But we're coming down the home stretch here, about a little over a month to go in the regular season, and it's Boston number 1, Oklahoma City number 2, and Cleveland number 3 in the betting. And Cleveland has already clinched a playoff spot. And I think with not necessarily Boston. Boston's been good, but the other two teams, this is the formula for turning around. They have been El Stinko. Look, Detroit's a good team this year. Detroit's going to be in the playoffs. They're not a factor to win the championship. But the mess that's been going on here for the last couple of years with the Wizards, maybe there's going to be another year whether they get Cooper Flagg or not. But once you get to the other side, this is what you can get to. Now, Philadelphia invented the process. Joel Embiid is out for the year. They're a mess right now, and they may never get there. Their chance may have evaporated. But this is how you have to do it. You can't just be a competitive team, and the foolishness of giving Bradley Beal that no-cut contract so that, as Ted said, they would have a partnership and everybody would come running to play for them. No, didn't work out. He wised up, got new front office people, and the pain they're going through right now maybe will pay off not too many years down the road. Okay, Justin Verlander on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday wants 300 wins. Can he get it? It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Where have you gone, anchormen? Where are they now? They're disappearing. David Muir, the longtime guy. I don't watch ABC, but it was 44 years ago today that Walter Kronkite said goodbye, and that's the way it is for the last time. So we'll get to that coming up shortly. Justin Verlander was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. He's a favorite of these talk shows. They love to have him on PTI. He's still at it, 42 years old. He is just signed with the San Francisco Giants and is attempting to get 300 wins. He's 38 away. I mean, he's not going to do it this year. Can he do it with 2 great years? Nah, not really. Not the way pitching is done these days. You just don't stick around long enough to in games, I should say, to accumulate that many wins. But he's there, and he's going to give it a shot. Why not? Still loves to pitch, and is married to Kate Upton. They have a child, a 6-year-old child. That's starting to change his life a little bit. But he's still at it. And when he came on Dan's show yesterday, asked him what he feels about the automated strike zone that they are experimenting with in spring training. Max Scherzer says he doesn't like it. Verlander isn't quite ready to go there.
I like the appeal system over the full automated zone, and the reason being, I think these umpires are asked to do a really difficult job. And they're also the best in the world at it, even though they're not perfect. But that's a tough zone to call, especially when guys are throwing 100 miles an hour with nasty breaking balls. So I don't want to take away the part of the game that I love, which is catcher framing. The pitcher hitting his spot and getting a call because everything presented correctly and it looks like a strike, and the umpire calls it, even though it's maybe a half an inch off. And the batter doesn't quite know. So in a big spot. In a big spot in the game, maybe he challenges. But if it's the first, second, third inning, nobody really knows if it's actually a ball or strike. So I don't want to take away that part of the game. But I think, there's obviously opportunities where it's an egregiously wrong call, where you can turn that over, or late in the game in a big spot where, both sides want to make sure we get it right. Well, I say both sides, but, everybody wants to make sure you get it right.
I saw where Max Scherzer's not in favor of this, and then I had to laugh because – you guys are veterans. You guys got calls. Like, the umpire might give you the benefit of the doubt. Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, you, Scherzer. The automated strike zone, they don't know who you are.
I wish they don't do that anymore for us. You go back, when I first came in the game, and you had those guys that you mentioned, Rocket, Roger, Maddux, Johnson. all those guys, you come into a game and it's like, hey, you're going to have a little bit bigger zone today. These guys have earned it. They tell all the hitters that. But with the umpires being monitored now, they get, even though it's not an automated strike zone, they get graded on every single game. So, I'm sure some of these older school umpires would like to give us a little bit bigger zone, but we don't get that advantage anymore. Unfortunately, I would love it.
How important is 300 wins to you? You're at 262.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't important. I see pretty clearly that, unless something changes, that I'd probably be the last to have a chance to do it. So it's something that is off in the distance. I'm not saying that I'm, the only reason I'm playing is to get to 300. I still feel good. I still feel like I can be successful, quite successful. I don't want to go out there and make a fool of myself just to try to reach that goal. But I think the injuries that I sustained last year, particularly, actually, I learned a lot from, and I think I can be the pitcher that I was 3 years ago when I won the Cy Young. So if 300 happens, it happens. But it's something that, like a lot of the things I've been able to achieve in my career, it just happens because you're out there taking the ball and doing all the right things and just pitching. That's it.
What's the conversation like when you sit down with Kate and you go, well, tell me what the conversation's like where you decide you want to play another year?
Yeah. She's super supportive, man. It's getting harder. Our daughter is 6 now and in kindergarten. So you got real school happening where they can't just pick up and transplant the family for the baseball season. But, she knows how much I care and how much passion I have for this. And my analogy is, I want to set a good example for my daughter. And, my analogy is like, I've spent my entire life training for this marathon. I've literally, since I'm 5 years old, since I was 5, I picked up a baseball and told my parents I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. And here I am living my dream. And, still feel like I can play at a high level. So I've trained my entire life to be in the middle of this marathon. Here I am running it, and I feel like I'm, I don't know how close I am to the finish line, but I'm damn close. And what a disservice it would be to me and my daughter to give up now. So, I'm going to keep playing and working as hard as I can. And in talking to my friends, they tell me, the guys that have retired, they say when you know, and I don't know exactly what that means yet. So that tells me I'm not there.
Maybe it's a form of the Bill Parcells. If you think about retiring, you're retired. He still wants to do it. Again, 38 away, 262. Can he do it at the age of 42? We'll see. But one thing is fairly certain. If he were coming along today as a rookie, the thought of climbing the mountain of 262 when you get 5 or 6 innings, never more than 100 pitches in a game, would you have an opportunity to do that? Probably not. And this is Verlander on just that. If he were coming along today, could he have the career that he's had up to this point?
Very different. I often wonder about this because, it permeates all the way down now to Little League level. I mean, you see all these Instagram famous places where you go to learn how to throw harder. Look, they have a place, they do. But for me, if I look back at my trajectory, when I was a young kid, and I clearly got to the point pretty quickly where my father was like, you're past my expertise. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. So he found me a local coach, and that coach talked baseball back then. Talked about mechanics and feel and flow, and his name was Bob Smith in Richmond, Virginia, and that is gone now. I think now if my dad were to be in the same position, he would send me somewhere that teaches me how to be a little more cookie cutter and try to throw as hard as you can instead of learning your own mechanics and cultivating your own movement pattern and learning how to pitch a little bit more. And I don't know where that leads. Yeah, I talked about this a lot. I don't know if I would have been able to have this career had I came up in today's age.
Toughest out in your career? Like this guy came to the plate and you go, all right, let me just try something totally out of left field.
Salvador Perez has done really well against me in division. I would say, the good thing is though, he didn't have a ton of homers against me. So And Salvy's not the fastest guy on the face of the earth. So it didn't bother me so much. But if he came up with men on base, it was trouble for me.
But would you rather give up a bomb or one that trickles right over the left field wall?
Great question. It depends on the situation in the game.
Let's say it's just you're up 5-0.
Bomb. I'd rather give up a homer.
Like 450 feet, you're okay.
I'm completely fine with it. At least I challenged you. I can move on from that. We're still up 4-0. There's nobody on base. I still feel comfortable. A little blooper, and then then another guy gets a base hit. Now it's then a guy hits a homer, and it's a 2-run ball game. That's a little different.
Greg Maddux said, describe the sound of a home run. He says it's like a car crash.
Yeah, boy. I mean, these guys.
But you know it right. Do you know it right away? Without even turning around.
Sometimes, yeah. A lot of times, no. It's kind of like you just had that reaction where you're like, get down, and you're in your head the whole thing. You got a few seconds, so you get down. And you just don't. It's going to be close. And then some of them, you're just like, oh boy. Yeah.
When you're not pitching in spring training, what do you do?
There's been a lot of guys here playing chess, so that's been fun. We've been getting some good chess games going on, and we're going to start a San Francisco Giants chess club.
Not in the dugout.
Not in the dugout. No. In spring training, you don't really. I mean, especially with my tenure, they don't make me be in the dugout anymore. But it's been fun this year. I mean, that's one of the positives of my family not being out here, which has been difficult. This is my first spring training in Arizona, but I've had more time to connect with the younger guys and spend some time at the field. So I really enjoy just taking that all in. And I think the perspective of where I'm at in my career. I think you want to enjoy it a little bit more and realize that it's not indefinite, that you get to play this game. And so it's been fun being around and hanging around the park a lot.
What hat will you wear when you go into the Hall of Fame?
Oh gosh. I honestly do not know. I don't think I would tell you even if I did, but
it's a good problem to have, Justin.
It is a good problem to have. You're right. Who could have known what would have happened in Houston when I got traded there in 2017? Like how much success I was able to have. No, I couldn't have forecasted that. Nobody really could have. So I just have this mentality that, just head down. I'm working hard, and however far this career takes me and where it takes me, when the dust settles, when I sit back and I look back, that's when I'll ask those questions. But I get asked a fair amount, and quite frankly, I just haven't even tried to make that decision yet. It's obviously been thought of, but I'm trying not to make the decision.
You still have your Tiger uniform, don't you?
Of course I do.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And your Tiger hat.
I have a lot of gear.
Okay.
Every year at the end of the season, I send it all back to my house, and just it's like I'm honestly not looking forward to going through all of it.
Which brings me to this. That's Justin Verlander with Dan Patrick yesterday. He's going to the Hall of Fame. I would think that it would be as a Detroit Tiger. I think that's the team he's most associated with. Probably pitched the most years of his career, though he's been around some. But the gear that he has at home from all the teams that he has pitched with, it reminds me of Bud Grant. Bud Grant, the great coach of the Minnesota Vikings in the Hall of Fame. He did get them to 4 Super Bowls. They didn't win any of them, but he was a tremendous coach for a long time and the toughest guy you ever saw. A great athlete. Played in the NBA, played in the Canadian Football League, played with the Philadelphia Eagles. Not a Hall of Fame player, but obviously an incredible athlete to have played at that level at both sports. And then, of course, went and coached the Vikings for a long, long time, had the Purple People Eaters, and, you used to see him on the sidelines in just a sweatshirt when it was like 3 below, and he banned heaters on the sidelines and all that. Bud Grant was incredible. Died a couple of years ago in his 90s. And in his later years, what he used to do, and this would be a great idea for Justin Verlander, he would have a garage sale every year. All that stuff he accumulated over the years, playing in the NBA, playing in the Canadian League, in the NFL, coaching in Canada, coaching in the NFL. You accumulate a lot of gear, a lot of stuff, a lot of mementos. And he would have a garage sale every year, and he would donate the money to charity. That would be a great idea for Justin Verlander. I don't know where he lives. Maybe he doesn't want people to know where he lives. He could have it someplace else. He could have it at a local high school or something like that. But that is the way to go. If you got all that gear lying around your house, pick out the stuff you want to hang on to and sell the rest of it and use the money for something good. I think that'd be really cool, and sign some of that stuff. Yeah, there's probably a lot of guys who have these things lying around the house. Do something good with it. Don't just, dump it. Don't just, I don't think you would give it to the Goodwill. As a matter of fact, Mike Mayock, who for a long time was an analyst with the NFL Network and then got his shot to be the general manager of the Raiders, and that didn't last. He was there 2-3 years. But he said what he did before he left, I think they were still in Oakland. I don't know if they made it to Vegas or not. Maybe they did. But before he left, he went to the local firehouse and he donated that stuff there. That's fine. You can do that too. But don't just put it in a trash bag and get rid of it. Get something for it. So that would be my suggestion to Justin Verlander. Not that he needs any suggestions for me. And with 38 wins to go, could he get it in 2 years? Unlikely. Could he get it in 3? Maybe. Could he pitch till he's 45 or 46? Nolan Ryan did. So maybe. In 300, he would have to be. Because the way pitchers are treated these days, unless they change the rules dramatically, if he gets to 300, Justin Verlander will be the last pitcher to win 300 games, right? Got to be. Walter Johnson, I guess, the last to win 400. So Verlander would be the last to win 300 games. Coming up, 44 years ago today, he said, "That's the way it is for the last time." It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Rams coming up at 11 o'clock. I had heard a couple of weeks ago that Lester Holt is going to be leaving NBC News in the summer. He's been doing it for 10 years. He's 65 years old, but he seems to have a lot of pep still. He's not retiring. He's still going to do Dateline and some other things for NBC, but he's leaving the anchor desk. And when one of the 3 anchors used to leave, that was a big deal. Peter Jennings sadly died on the job. He had lung cancer. He was in his 60s, I believe, at that point. Tom Brokaw left NBC. I believe it was something that he wanted to do at the time. And this was, I'm sure it was Lester Holt's decision, but the point is it was not even a blip on the radar. Like, nobody even reacted to that. And yesterday, NBC announced his replacement. It's somebody I never heard of, Tom Llamas. Tom, Llamas. Not familiar with him at all. And when Walter Cronkite retired at CBS, which was 44 years ago today, and he'd been doing it for a long time, but it wasn't 30 years. He started in 1963, so it was 18 years that he'd been at the anchor desk. But a lot of obvious turmoil in the country during that time, including early on in his tenure, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and the Vietnam War, and all the things that we had been through as a country. And in 1981, he left. He was 64 years old. He always came across as older. He was like, Uncle Walter. But what had happened, and this is how cutthroat it was at the time, and one of the best biographies I ever read was Roone Arledge. Roone Arledge was a genius at ABC. He did sports and news. He didn't have as much success at news. He put together Barbara Walters and Harry Reasoner, and that didn't work. But in 1981, after that experiment failed, he wanted to get Walter Cronkite off the desk at CBS. And he didn't necessarily, he didn't want him. He didn't want Dan Rather, but he was such a smart guy and such a smart strategist that he made it public, made it known. He didn't announce it, but he let it be known that he was courting Dan Rather to take over at ABC. Rather had spent his whole career at CBS and had made his mark on 60 Minutes, and as a great reporter, he covered the Kennedy assassination when he was based in Dallas. That was his big break to get one of the top network correspondent jobs, covered the White House, things like that. And so he made it known that he was going after him. That made CBS panic because Rather was the anchorman in waiting, and they pushed Uncle Walter out the door. and Rather took over. And I think he lasted the longest of anybody. He might have lasted 24, 25 years. His tenure ended when he got a little overzealous in his coverage of George Bush and didn't do enough fact-checking, which, turned out to be wrong, and he was forced out there in the early part of the century. But in 1981, Dan Rather was taking over, and Walter Cronkite on this day said, and that's the way it is for the last time.
This is my last broadcast as the anchor man of the CBS Evening News. For me, it's a moment for which I long have planned, but which nevertheless comes with some sadness. For almost 2 decades, after all, we've been meeting like this in the evenings, and I'll miss that. But those who have made anything of this departure, I'm afraid, have made too much. This is but a transition, a passing of the baton. A great broadcaster and gentleman, Doug Edwards, preceded me in this job, and another, Dan Rather, will follow. And anyway, the person who sits here is but the most conspicuous member of a superb team of journalists, writers, reporters, editors, producers, and none of that will change. Furthermore, I'm not even going away. I'll be back from time to time with special news reports and documentaries, and beginning in June, every week with our science program, Universe. Old anchormen, you see, don't fade away. They just keep coming back for more. And that's the way it is. Friday, March 6th, 1981. I'll be away on assignment, and Dan Rather will be sitting in here for the next few years. Good night.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
I missed that. So that was Uncle Walter saying goodbye. He lived to 92, 93. In fact, when Katie Couric did the CBS Evening News, he cut the intro for her to introduce her at the anchor desk for CBS. And that's been, part of one experiment after another after Dan Rather. And I have no idea who's doing CBS now. Nora O'Donnell just recently left. So I guess we are now in an era where mainstream news has changed so dramatically that young David Muir, who looks like he's 30 years old, is now the senior anchor in a landscape that, is entirely different than it was 44 years ago when Walter Cronkite said goodbye. All right, a few other items to finish up with before we get to Bram at 11 o'clock. My friend John Saraceno, longtime columnist with USA Today, I think he left 10, 12 years ago, but he used to write a column every year. John loves dogs, and he wrote a column every year saying that the Iditarod needs to go away. He called it the I Heard a Dog. Now, it's been around since 1973, so it's a long-time running event. Most people know what it is. It's a dog sled race through the wilderness of Alaska. It's over 1,000 miles, 1,100 miles, and a team of dogs pull a 400-pound sled with a guy behind the sled, as the musher, I guess. And so Sally Jenkins wrote a column today, similar to what John had written over the years. She's suggesting that actually people do the Iditarod. Instead of dogs, we have people see how they like it. She says the Iditarod persists in the idea we could all use a little more rugged American origin story scruff, and we've become too bespoke suited and monogram slippered. But actually, the race was launched in 1973 and has all the ethic of a refrigerator magnet, and it really would be more instructive and character revealing if we actually tied the mushers together in gang lines and ordered them to find the trail, noses down and hind ends up. First off, it would make them harden up because of the 603 dogs that started last year's race. Just 293 finished and 3 died. At least 118 dogs have died since the start of the race in 73, she says. The Iditarod over 15 years found the most common causes of death other than the aforementioned gastric aspiration were acute stomach bleeds or sled dog myopathy, a fancy vet word for work to the point of collapse. Let's put it this way. A dog has died in 36 of the Iditarod's 52 years, and sometimes as many as 6 or 9 die. And she says that huskies and other sled dogs are not big, around 50 to 60 pounds, yet they still lose 9% of their body weight in a week. It is a tough race, and, I guess it doesn't have the television coverage to keep it in the consciousness of most people in the 50 states, but in Alaska, this is a big deal, and she says it is time for it to go away, as John Saraceno wrote many times over the years. Here's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I've been hanging on to this story a little while. The idea of intermission at movies. I had some surgery a few years back, which has helped the bladder problem, but hasn't totally taken care of it. And they make these movies now, which are really, really long, and they don't have intermission. I remember the days back in the 60s when you'd have, I think The Sound of Music had an intermission, if I'm not mistaken. But these movies that come out now, The Batman, 176 minutes, Oppenheimer, which came out last year, 180 minutes, The Irishman, 209 minutes. I watched all of these on either DVD or on Netflix, but these are the lengths of these movies now. And Travis Andrews wrote this story a couple of weeks ago. It says, Hollywood's grandest productions knew when to give us a breather. Ben-Hur, Gone with the Wind, Gandhi, 1982. That was the 192-minute movie. I was young enough to sit through this in those days when The Right Stuff came out, 192 minutes. It had no intermission, but then again, there were no bathroom breaks in space, pointed out. Well put. So now we've got these long movies, and there's a push, and I would be behind this, to have bathroom breaks. Wicked, 160 minutes. The Brutalist, 215 minutes. There is an intermission there. I guess they've started to bring them into these movies. They used to break up films, and this is the reason that they were able to do away with the intermission, because you had to change the film and the projector. You don't have to do that anymore. You used to swap out the reels. Now that you don't have to do that, they've done away with intermissions. But I think it's something whose time has come, that you need to bring it back, and I would be all in favor. Of course, I do go to movies occasionally, but I really don't know how movie theaters still exist. I really don't. I have 65 inches. I can pause it whenever I want, go to the bathroom. I don't have to pay $10 for popcorn or whatever it costs. I got my own snacks there. I don't know. But that's I think if you're going to show movies in the theater and they're going to go over 200 minutes, you should have an intermission. That's my stance on that. And then finally this. This was a bizarre story that came out, and it, I guess, came out of nowhere. These kind of stories do on podcasts. Dwayne Wade was on the Underground Lounge, and he does that with former NBA player Lou Williams. So they were talking about LeBron James leaving Miami. Remember when he left Miami after going there in 2010, played there 4 years, went back to Cleveland, I think, to take care of unfinished business, won a championship for them, and then went to the Lakers. But Wade was saying that the reason LeBron left Miami was because Heat president Pat Riley confiscated LeBron's favorite chocolate chip cookies on a team flight. Like LeBron was used to getting on the plane and having a warm chocolate chip cookie. Oh, there's nothing like that. And then one day he got on the plane. There were no cookies, and he was told that Pat Riley took them away. And Wade said in this podcast, one thing you don't do is F with LeBron's cookies, except he said the word. And he said there was too much micromanaging at that point. You're talking about a team with 4 finals in a row. You don't need to micromanage us. I felt that Pat Riley, went a little bit too far in his micromanaging at points like that. He's a grown man. You don't take the cookies away. Well, Dan Le Batard, who has been, I don't know whether he still does this, but at one point he was a very well-known columnist for the Miami Herald and would investigate stories like this. And Dan Le Batard said on his show, podcast that he does, he says, the Miami Heat believe that in this instance, Dwayne Wade appears to be lying. He said this yesterday on his show. The Heat claimed that Riley was not on the flight when the team nutritionist controls the menu, and the dessert was ice cream, not cookies. That's what I was told, Le Batard said. Everyone knows that Pat would have eaten those cookies himself because he loves chocolate chip cookies, so the story has no truth to it. So it took Dan Le Batard, an accomplished journalist, to get to the bottom of this story that Dwayne Wade is claiming that the reason they lost one of the best players in NBA history was because Pat Riley took away the chocolate chip cookies. I think there's probably some gray area in here. I do know from my friend Steve Buckhantz, who learned over the years, as a guy who doesn't play basketball every night and at that time was sitting and doing games, that yes, these things are available on the flight. He went through the whole menu at one point with me, what was available. And if you don't watch yourself as a middle-aged guy like we are, and you eat these things and you eat these chocolate chip cookies on a regular basis, it's not a good thing. But if you're LeBron James, that amount of calories doesn't mean much. Pat Riley's really skinny. Can't imagine he eats a lot of chocolate chip cookies, but I guess he does. But thank goodness we can all rest well tonight that Dan Le Batard has gotten to the bottom of this, and he has debunked the story that the reason that LeBron James left the Miami Heat was that Pat Riley took away his cookies, and as Wade said, you don't F with LeBron's cookies. Well, maybe, in fact, LeBron's cookies were not F with. And that does it for me. Bram is coming up next. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.